Hey guys, Mike here. Welcome back to another video on the channel. If you watched the walk around video I did maybe 2-3 videos ago, and one thing I pointed at was the rear quarter panel, how I wanted to make rear tube fenders to match the front tube fenders that I fabricated. But I bought myself some rear quarter panel armour. I got this from the USA. I got both sides for $150. It's a great foundation to build these tube fenders off of for me. And that's what we're going to be doing today in this video. We're going to be doing the other side, and I'm going to show you kind of how I've done that. What you're seeing here is clearly not the finished product. I just don't have the materials to get it finished at this time. But I want to build the other side before I go any further, just so I can match it up with this perfectly so they're both symmetrical. And then I can take some 2mm steel, like this sheet here. Sadly it's not long enough because I butchered it for other projects, but if it was, it would be perfect. I can then put this on the top there, just maintaining a slight uniformed incline up to the plate, so we get a little bit of runoff at least. And then we plate this all the way along, matching the contours of the tube, literally exactly like we did with the front. Very easy job actually. You can just spot weld it and then maybe use fiberglass filler and just paint over it. I'm going to do continuous welding because you know, I find things generally last a bit longer. You don't get so much rust building up and things like that under the welds and the filler and all that rubbish that you use. But in terms of piping, this is 22.5mm with a 3mm wall. I think in Imperial that's 7/8. I didn't want to go too thick because I want to keep the weight down. The Jeep's almost a little bit overweight as it is. When you did the walk around video I showed you the tyre carrier and the rear bumper. I've actually taken that off now because I've been doing a lot of work around the back, and I want to try and build a new tyre carrier and incorporate it into the bumper to try and consolidate it to bring the weight down. So I'm not too bothered about adding this because I've shedded the roof tent. I'm ditching the old tyre carrier, and that's, you know, that's almost over 100 kilos gone already basically. So this is the extra piece that you could say is missing from the quarter panel armour, and really all we're doing is we're building a mounting face for the tube fenders to give them strength, but also so we can make the whole thing removable if it gets damaged and everything else. But to mount the quarter panel armour, which is the first thing I installed to get it in position, I used these plugs here, and this was the hardware that was provided to me with the quarter panel armour set. So that's actually really cool, and they gave you a lot extra too. So you know, if you make mistakes you've always got plenty. But this is just sheet metal, so when you mount these you do have to be kind of careful that you don't kind of go too crazy with the drill, heating up the sheet metal as you drill through and, you know, causing the metal to warp and stuff, although the panel armour will pull it back slightly when you tighten it up. But if you look at the extra piece I made, you'll see that this is what I've added on later. So I've got the quarter panel armour in first, and I've made a template out of cardboard. Later we'll mark some lines there too to show me where the bends need to be. I've got the piece of cardboard in place. I've then made this out of steel, which is what we're going to do next, and then we're going to drill some holes, get everything in position, and then put these plugs in. We can get everything bolted in, tack weld, and then start to assemble the tubing and get everything in the right place. So this is our first step. To get to this actual shape and get it perfect, I took the old plastic fender that I had, and I basically just cut this section away just with the grinder. That's basically how I got the shape I wanted, and it also allows you to get these bends just in the right place as well. So as you're making the piece of sheet metal and you cut some relief lines to get the bends, you can match it up with this and make sure you've got everything just right. So you can see that's the positioning I'm going for, and we'll clip that off, but we'll make sure that's the same as the other side. And then we need to put a cut there with the cut off wheel so we can then bend that inwards. And we're going to put, just have to get my big head in the way there, another cut there so we can create that bend. and then get this all matched up okay. It should be exactly the same shape, and we're pretty damn close. So you can see I've just put some pretty deep cuts in there. I can actually bend this with my hand, and you can see I've got the piece of sheet, or the old piece of Fender there, so I can just pop this up against that and then just double check I've got my lines right. So the first bend obviously goes in, and yeah, there we go, just bent it with my hand. It's not actually that hard. So you can pop that up against there. Obviously we need to go in a little bit more, so I'm going to have to take the hammer there, or put it in this vise and just put a bit of force down on it. And we will put some weld along here just to give it some strength back later. So where are we? Hopefully you can see this. So yeah, that's looking pretty good actually. In fact, that's pretty much bang on. And then this other one is gonna go down. But I think what we're gonna have to do is put that in the vise, or else I'm gonna run the risk of bending the other one too much and then it's gonna crack. And obviously if you've got heat, this is gonna go a lot smoother for you. That's looking about right. So that's it, hopefully. Yeah, looks pretty good. Looks pretty good, let's try it out. So we're gonna be like, to get my head in the way, like that. That's actually okay. And once we start drilling these locations and putting those plugs in and bolting it down, we're obviously going to pull this in a little bit more, so that should look pretty good. So we're just going to mark these areas here with the paint marker. That went fast. To some people, drilling holes in sheet metal like this could be considered a death sentence, and if you don't do the proper preparation, it really is. If you notice the other side, I used heavy Tiger Seal seam sealant around the plugs when they're pushed in and they're tightened down, so the seam sealer almost gets squidged in there and creates like a gasket basically, where the moisture can't get in. And you know, that's the best really you can do with something like this in most respects. But you know, another thing you may be able to do is you could weld the plug in there and then paint, and then maybe use something like a cavity wax nozzle from getting inside the panel through various holes and locations, and then spraying cavity wax everywhere inside the panel, so if the weld had burnt away any paint the other side, you would cover that. And that's kind of like the way, you know, you really have to preserve vehicles. Before I did this job, I stripped down all the undercoat off of the vehicle, and about 5 years ago I'd done a lot of prep work on this vehicle. I've shown you in videos the renovation work I've done. I mean, hours of grinding away with you know, wire brushes and on angle grinders and shot blasting and all sorts of stuff to get the rust out, and then cutting out and replacing stuff that was too far gone. And I stripped the undercoat back about 2-3 weeks ago, and it took me ages to do it, you know, talking weeks of work basically. And I was really happy to see that everything looked really good underneath. So then I did another Dynatrol treatment on top of it that you can see here, which is that creeping cavity wax. You mix 50-50 with thinner, you just blast it everywhere, inside every door, every panel, in the rocker panels, everywhere, you know, inside here, inside the archway. It's all over the place in this vehicle, and I've spent quite a lot of time chasing rust on it and doing my best to stop it. So the other side of here, we do have cavity wax. We're going to get the seam sealer in this, we're going to get the plugs in, we're going to tighten that down. But the nice thing about this setup is that you're not welding anything directly to the sheet metal. You can take this off and you can maintain it. You know, you can take this off periodically and check everything if you need to. I'm using this stuff here. It's actually really good. I use it outside too for things around the house, and it withstands some pretty harsh temperatures. But we're just going to put a little bit around here on each one of these holes, and it just means when the plug goes in and gets tightened down, there'll be a little bit of sealant the other side too. It'll get pulled backwards as the plug pulls up against the sheet metal, and you know, that should give us a little bit of a better chance really at avoiding any corrosion in the future. Just don't want to go too crazy tapping on it so you bend the sheet metal in, but obviously remember it will get pulled back out when the plate goes on. The tool I'm going to use is super basic. It's basically just like a kind of nut, and the bolt goes through it. You screw it into this little plug here, and then you hold that with a number 15 spanner, tighten that with a number 11. That gets tightened up, and yeah, that's it really. The reason I say 15 and 11 is these are actually imperial sizes, but the closest I have is a 15 and 11 mil. So we just screw this in. You can put the spanner on it, and we just hope the tool eventually grips, which it usually does. It's already spinning in the hole quite a bit, so normally what happens is it grips like it has just done now. I can feel it. It kind of bites into the top, and you feel it go real tight, and then we take that out. It's pretty simple really. It's good now. Alright, so that's our missing piece, you know, in lack of a better explanation. So it's sitting just above the curve, so we know it's always going to sit flush. This is a little bit too long here, but that's okay, we can clip that when we need to. And we've got a bit of a gap there like we did on the other one, but it's not a big deal because we can bridge that with a bit of weld. Now it's time to bend some tube, and that's going to be the tricky bit. This is the piece of pipe we're using, the 22.5 mil, and this is the only piece of pipe I have left, apart from what's in here, little curves and a few small straight pieces, which we can use for stuff like this, like the little braces and maybe some curves on the end. But basically we have to get this right, and because I've already made one, you haven't seen the process in which I used to work out how big I wanted this to be, this opening here. And on the back, because the wheel doesn't obviously steer, it just remains straight all the time and just goes up and down with the leaf spring. I didn't have to open up the well too much, especially at the top. It could remain the same. So if you look here, I basically made the piece of pipe essentially to the same dimensions as this here, but all I've done is widened it out just a little bit at the bottom there, so where it curves at the same place, it just doesn't follow this line completely, it goes out a bit more like that, just to open it up at the bottom. And that's really it. The difficulty with the front was I had to make the curve over here somewhere, because the front actually has to be a bigger opening because the wheel steers. So it's not too difficult on the back to get this right. But because we already have one that we've made based upon this arch here, I just need to mark out where I want the bends to be and see if I can get them in the right place. And if we get them in the wrong place, then I'm going to have to make a cut in the middle and rejoin the pipe together by building some kind of insert on the inside so it retains some integrity. But let's give it. This is the pipe bender I'm using, and it's a 12-ton pipe bender, basically a bottle jack really that you put an attachment on the top. And this is obviously what we're using, 1/2 inch, or perhaps that's 15 gauge, I believe. Maybe that's what that means, I'm not sure, but yeah, 1/2 inch pipe, and it comes with a lot of other attachments at the back. You can bend loads of different types of pipe, and I mean, you know, it's really useful, especially if you want to build a roll cage or something like that, but perhaps you'll need something a bit more heavy duty. But we're just going to adjust this on the settings there. And just leave it like that, and then we're going to put our piece of pipe in. And this is the difficulty of having a relatively small workspace. We're going to put that dot right in the centre there, and we're going to see how that goes, and I'll give you a shot of that just above so you see what that looks like. The dot's right in the centre, and that's where the centre of our bend will hopefully be. Another tip is to bend a scrap piece of pipe to exactly the correct angle you want, just to have as a template, so as you're bending this you can match this up and get things in the right place, so you don't have to keep taking it out and kind of comparing it against the template. The same with the wheel arch. That's what I did before with the old plastic Fender. I just had it here and just kind of you know, worked with it slowly, just making sure I got the right angle. But it's easy to make one, it's always the hardest thing to make two of exactly the same. Just make sure that's all in the right place, and we'll start bending this. If you use heat as well with this pipe bender, what you'll find is you won't end up flattening out the pipe too much. So yeah, a bit more. That's exactly it. So we'll just, yeah, a little bit of spring back. That looks perfect. Give it a try. Nice. That looks great. So I've marked the other piece of pipe, and I'm going to start bending now and hope that we're accurate. And once I start doing the bend, you can see that now the machine has bitten it. We need to twist the pipe, make sure it's basically straight, or else the bends are going to be all wrong. And that looks great. So our dot obviously indicates that too. And now we're going to start putting some bendage in it. Okay, moment of truth. Perfect. That's absolutely as good as I could probably get it, really. This is it, moment of truth. No one's going to believe me if it works. Oh, you're joking, it's almost perfect. That's what luck is, I guess. Hopefully you can see this okay and the lighting's good enough. That's always the problem in this garage, I just need to buy more lights. But you can see I've put a stud in there. It's actually a stud of the wrong thread type, so it's just bitten in a little bit and this one isn't biting in at all, so I can't have that one there. Normally I'd have a stud there, that's what I did the other side, and then that gives you your level of keeping the flare to the same geometry as the rest of the lines on the vehicle. But we're just going to have to do this by eye. I have a magnet here, and there was a magnet there. Right, it's on the floor, and I have my other flare just here, so I can sort of do it by eye. This is going to hang under here, and we're going to wrap some wire around here like that, and that's really just going to allow us to get things lined up as best we can. It's taken me a really long time to get to this point, and without this stud here it's actually been really difficult to get everything in the right place. And interestingly enough, the other side is M10, whereas this is some kind of Imperial stud, and the reason being is I had some issues with it, and it's a long story. But basically I've spot welded this in place here because it's the one thing I'm sure about, this particular bend, and that being spot welded in place actually allows me to manipulate the rest of the bar without losing my position, so I can bring it out more and then bring it in more, and then I can remove this curve here, take it away, I can shorten it, I can build another one. And it actually does need to be lengthened, because if you look, I've got a magnet acting as a spacer between the two pipes there. But I've got the other piece on the floor here, and I'm just measuring really everything and making sure it's the same. So we have 3 centimeters here, and then we go up to 5 centimeters, and it continues 5 centimeters all the way to this point. I have to push that in a little bit to get that 5 centimeters. And I can't remember where that thing was I specifically made for this very job, which I've flipping gone and lost basically. Oh, there it is. It might be that one there. But that's going to slot in there, and that's going to then give me my 5 centimeters I need at that particular point. Yeah, just check that. Should be 6.3 mil, and it is. Yeah, 5.5, 5, and then 3. So we should be on par for keeping it as accurate as the other one. My only concern is this level here. Before we burn it in properly, we'll take the whole thing outside, we'll put weight in the back, we'll level the vehicle where I want it, check it. This is exactly what I did to the other side. And then when I'm happy with it, then yeah, we'll burn the whole thing in, because it's way easier just to cut a few spot welds and bend a few things and manipulate it now than when you've solidly welded all around every joint. So just the back bit now, and we're good. Well, it's the following day, and I got everything tacked in place last night where you saw me leave it in that last clip, and I decided to walk away from it and come back to it today and have another look, take a fresh eye. And I came in this morning, I've wiped down the vehicle of all of the metal dust and brushed out all the nooks and crannies, because obviously I need to take the vehicle outside today, stand as far back as really I need to, and check the geometry of these fender flares. You know, what kind of tilt I'm looking at, are they looking level, the height of them, all of that kind of stuff before I start really messing around and getting them permanently set in place. Obviously I dropped the spare tyre, dropped the bumper and the tyre carrier. That's 150 plus kilos, probably more, gone from the very back of the vehicle. So the vehicle rose up maybe even a couple of inches when that was all taken off. So you know, the stance was that it was lower forward than it was at the back. But yeah, that's important, because obviously if you're making the fender, you want to make sure it's level. You know, so I've set the fender flare, basically this tube here, in line with this body line just here, and this piece of pipe, and this line here. So these are the lines I'm using to make sure this is on the correct level. Not really this arch here, but more these other lines, because these are pretty much straight on the very back of the panel here. At the front it goes forward, so you kind of ignore that when you make the front one, but this back one here is basically straight, and obviously this line here is straight too. You can jack the vehicle up and you can adjust your shackle relocation brackets if you've got them, and I've put the shackle on the nearest bolt hole to the front of the vehicle, so that's dropped the vehicle down actually about an inch and a half. So you know, I've got a slightly more level back ends now, and if I load some stuff in the back, maybe try and stuff the 35 in there, I might be able to level my vehicle out a little bit more. So let's get this outside, have a good look at it, make sure we're happy, and then we're going to take this off, put the Jeep outside and get this burnt in properly. So I've had the Jeep outside for a while, and I've been checking it over, tried to weigh down the back of the vehicle with some bricks and various other hardware just to level it out even more, but I ended up using the high lift jack to just pull the front up just an inch or two until the vehicle looks level, how it normally looks really when it's got stuff in the back of it. And I did some measurements, I checked everything over, I took photos and had a good look at them, and just made sure everything was level. And on that side of the vehicle, which is my passenger side but most of the rest of the world's driver side, it was fine. Everything looked really level and it looked really good, but the side that we did on the video wasn't looking exactly right, so I had to loosen up the spot welds with the grinder and just move down the back a little bit because it was sticking up too much. So you could see the front was level, but then the back one was kind of like this, and it just didn't look so good. So I've spent a bit of time just kind of cutting things down and making sure everything's okay. And now we're basically ready to just spot weld that back bit permanently where it needs to be. The welder's running on 5.1 amps at 19 volts, seems to be going nice, and gas is on 7 litres per minute, so everything seems to be okay, and we'll just see how it goes. Okay, well, I finished welding and I've mounted this on, and really I've put it on just to check for warping, and there isn't any, which is great. One thing we do have a problem with is the sagging of the rear passenger door. It's affecting, or it will in time affect the clearance of this. So we've got probably 3mm clearance at the moment. I mean, with the 2mm sheet steel on top and the paint, I think we're going to be in trouble, and you can hear it. And if we lift it up, so if we fix the hinge, you know, we've got 5, well, in fact more than that, we've got about 6mm of clearance, which is plenty. So that is something I'm going to have to look at, and all those hinges I replaced over a year ago. In fact, about a year and a half ago I did every door, took the doors off, and I was doing the raptor lining in here, and yeah, I'm pretty annoyed that they're going already, so I'm going to have a look at that. And well, it's the following day, and I managed to get some sheet metal this morning. I've got some 2mm sheet metal here, which is the thickness I want to use. Any thicker, I think the weight is just going to kind of go up and up and up, and I want to keep it pretty light. And if you look at the fender in front of me, I've actually welded the piece of sheet metal to it. But what I'm going to do now is get the other one off the vehicle. I'm going to get it in here. We're going to start tack welding this sheet metal in place, and I'll take you through the process of what I've done here while this one's drying, because it's obviously not been sanded down yet. That's why it looks all lumpy. Working off of the vehicle like this on this kind of project is actually pretty dangerous, and the reason being is we need to get this angle correct, this kind of tilt on the piece of sheet metal. We don't want to just lie it flat and weld it, because this is actually going inward like that, so it's not going to look good, and obviously the water will run down and go down there, which is not so much of a big deal, but it's more the appearance of the flare isn't uniform. We actually want to bring this up like that, and I've got a magnet just under here just to hold it in place. I'm going to go around the back, just have a look. That's too much of an incline, so we just drop that a little bit more. But what we'll do is we'll put one spot butt weld in place, and then we're going to go out and we're going to put this on the vehicle like this, and then you will see what our angle's like, and if it's no good I'm going to clip the spot weld with the grinder and I'm going to readjust it. My welder definitely isn't configured correctly. So I'm pretty happy with the positioning. You can see I've done some spot welds here, got it in place, just 3 spot welds there. This will be clipped off at an angle with the grinder all the way along once this is conformed to the panel, and these welds will probably be cut away in the process, and then it will be welded all the way along, but that's to come to later. First we've got to start bending this and just getting it in the correct position, and we do that really by just having it at an angle like that and just bending the piece of steel round like that, and then spot welding it in place. So what we're going to do is just come in like that at an angle and cut away the metal, and the reason we come at an angle so we don't have an overhang, and then we can weld it flush and grind it down and it'll look real nice. And we got a bit of filler on there, it'll just be a smooth roll all the way off when it's painted. So this is what we're left with, just cut up there, and it's a pretty decent outcome. You know, we followed the contours nicely along here as well. You can see that we just come in a little bit so we can put some weld in that gap there, and that'll be really strong. And also you'll see here we have a little bit of a gap, same with the other one. It's not really an issue. What we do is we just weld a little piece in there and basically just top it up with filler, but just weld from the back so no water can actually get through, and obviously we'll have the plastic liner in there too, so we should be good for any kind of damage over prolonged periods of time. But yeah, it seems to have come out pretty good. Quite happy with it. Obviously you can see there we got the overlap, and this is the angle we want. So what we'll do is once we've welded in here and we've filled it and everything, we'll just grind that flat and stay with the contours of the actual piece of metal here, the actual fender, and you won't see this bit sticking above it. But let's get welding. So I've finished all the welding, and some of these welds are garbage, others are actually quite nice and pretty structural. But I was very conscious about putting too much heat in this, especially around this area here. This is the bit, the little nose tends to come up like that, and you know, that's a real problem. But I had a tiny bit of warpage on the other one, nothing really too major, about 3mm. And you can put the high lift jack on the tyre and on the nose of this and just crank it once, put all the bolts in place, loosen the high lift jack, and then you can bolt it down. Obviously you're going to scratch the paint if it's painted, but if it's just a tiny scratch, you can obviously just pop that back on with a brush if it's wrapped a liner. So that's probably what I'll do, and I'll show you the process when I get there. But if you have a closer look at this, we're ready to kind of grind down these welds on the edge of the tubing now and just kind of make it smooth, so we can then put some filler on there, smooth it all off, kind of get it into a finished point where it can then be primed and painted. I'm putting small dollops of filler in here, and I'm pushing it in with my finger. We have weld the other side, so obviously it's sealed off from water on one side, which is important, but pushing it in with your finger just like this is just a nice way of forcing it into the gap, so it isn't just a thin crust on top. Well, I've moved into the basement where it's a lot warmer down here than it is in the garage. The temperature's really started to plummet, and tomorrow it goes down to about -5 degrees C in the day, whereas today, yeah, it was +9 degrees. So I thought to myself, I better get this stuff in and let it warm up, so when I paint it, the panels are warm, because it really isn't the time of year to be painting outside anymore. So the painting is going to come another day, but the end result is finished. I test fitted the fenders on the vehicle earlier today and just got everything mounted in place. I did need the use of the high lift jack just to compress the front part of the fender by about 3mm back, so I could get the bolts in, but I found a better way of mounting it was just to put studs inside those nutserts that you put in the sheet metal, put the front on first, lean the back bit back, and then slide it all into place, and it was a lot easier that way, and a little bit less kind of well, you know, less risk of damage anyway doing that. But in the last clip you saw me putting filler on and rubbing it into all the welds and everything. Obviously I'm past that point now. Today I went back out after the filler had hardened, and I sanded it all back. Kind of the finished product there. You've just got a very small amount of filler now, just in the pits of the weld, nothing else, and a little bit on this seam along the back here, just so when that's painted over it's going to look real clean. And also I used a little bit of filler on the inside, just rubbing it into the welds and stuff, and just filling any pinholes. I mean, filler's not really the best for that kind of job anyway, more like seam sealer and things like that are better, but this is fine. Obviously if water can get through something to get to the filler through the underneath of it, then I wouldn't use filler. But in this case, once we get this all painted and everything else, will be sealed up completely. And in these corners here we're going to use something else. We're actually going to use that seam sealer I used, but after the paint's been done. So once the paint's done, we'll squirt that in under here and kind of fill that up like we did on the front, and then you kind of minimize the risk of water getting through these small gaps into the welds. But all that's got to come in another video. and this is really where we wrap everything up. This is a finished product. Maybe this video is not so much as a how-to, but how I did it. And you know, if you're a very good fabricator, I mean, you'll be able to do this a much better way than I did and learn from my mistakes. I mean, I'm not the best at this kind of work. I just have basic tools, a basic garage, and I just try to get jobs like this done, and I enjoy it. You know, I really like this sort of work, so I'm pretty happy with the end results. I'm a bit disappointed that the doors only clear the top of the fenders, where they open on the rear by about 0.5 millimeter, and obviously those doors sagging is a real problem, and that's my next job. And then after that they can be mounted and used. So I'll bring you back in another video when I'm painting these, and I'll show you Raptor liner, because that's what we're going to use to paint them. And yeah, and then we'll get them mounted and everything else. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon in another one. Take care.